worked around the world quite a bit, and I think having those experiences makes you realise that there are very similar, although nuanced, issues around every nation. I started off doing my first overseas work in New Zealand as an unaccredited orthopaedic trainee, and one of the things that really was quite apparent to me was the different balance between the Maori population and the average New Zealand person compared to Australia and our Indigenous population. As a trainee about 2 decades ago, I had to sign as part of my hospital contract that I recognised the Treaty of Waitangi, and that quite blew me away, and it made me think quite deeply about why we don't have any recognition of our own Indigenous people here. So that was quite a landmark, I think, for me in really starting on a journey of thinking about diversity from an Indigenous perspective. When I worked in the US, it was quite surprising the extremes of wealth and poverty. I went to Indianapolis and had a wonderful time doing a fellowship in hand surgery there. But it was really quite disheartening to see that there were still ghettos in the inner city, and we were told that we shouldn't actually even stop the car at a red light if we were leaving the inner city hospital to go home at night. So there were also prisoners aplenty, chained at the ankles, and things that I really had never associated with the US, having grown up in Australia and been exposed mainly to the positive images. So that was really quite impactful for me. And I think that we all see that more and more so now, the extremes of opinion from the left and right. There are some amazing diversity workers in the US, both in the medical and orthopaedic fields and elsewhere. But at the other extreme, you have people that are very, very fixed in their ideas that really diversity is not for them at all. So that again was probably a powerful backstory for me. And similar things happened when I worked in France. I did a hand fellowship after the US, and living in Paris is an amazing opportunity, and working there and seeing different perspectives in surgery. But I also saw a sort of a different perspective in whereabouts you categorize your colleagues from different nations. That was really took me aback a little. One of our trainees there, one of the other fellows, was from Morocco, and he was a lovely fellow and worked very hard, but there were definitely people who had opinions about him purely on face value that he was not from Europe. So those experiences definitely fed into my development of an interest in diversity. I believe one of the most important lessons would be that we all have something to offer, and there are a lot of different ways to achieve goals, whether they're orthopaedic goals or they're more social aspects of how we work as surgeons. I've had some really amazing mentors, and they have opened my eyes to different ideas. I think the opportunity to go overseas and train is really so valuable. We have fantastic surgeons in Australia, but I think it really opens your eyes to really think in a different way. Maybe you won't even take some of those ideas on, but you'll actually think differently about what you come into contact with and what ideas you see. So I think that is really very, very important, and I really recommend anyone, even if they only have the opportunity to go for 6-week or 4-week fellowship to travel overseas and also develop those friendships and develop colleagues who are from other places. I've had the opportunity while I was at the chair of the Orthopaedic Women's Association, AOA, to meet with quite a lot of women in orthopaedics around the world, mostly virtually, some in person. And I was quite taken by some of the groups of women that I hadn't really thought about, and it really opened my eyes a bit to the fact that we all have our own unconscious biases. The first time one of my Malaysian colleagues, PC Chai, who was the president of the Malaysian Orthopaedic Association, surprisingly the 4th female president, or 3rd, I think. They've had 4 now, but to think that we've had 1 female orthopaedic president and Malaysia has 4 is also a little bit mind-blowing, I think, for your average Anglophile. So she sent some photos about trying to promote women in orthopaedics, and she sent a photo along with about 60 women in hijabs who were orthopaedic surgeons. And it really made me realize that I too have unconscious biases. I didn't picture 60 or 70 women in hijabs as orthopaedic surgeons. So it makes you realize that, you know, other people have these perspectives, and we all do. We're all results of the environment we've been brought up in. And I think questioning your own perspectives is really important. And that's another thing I think you learn from seeing how people do things differently, how they interact differently. It just makes you question more and be more curious. And that's really been another driving force for me. One of my colleagues is a Saudi Arabian surgeon, and you may be really surprised to know that in 2022, Saudi Arabia had more female orthopaedic trainees by percentage than the USA. So, you know, don't take things on face value is a message that has been pushed home to me. The more I learn, the more I am curious about what actually is the reality and why. Why is it so? Why were they able to train such a high percentage of women, and why do they have so many female presidents? I guess I'm a curious person, so I quite enjoy the different cultures and trying to understand how they achieve things that we have not been able to achieve. Well, I think my advice would really be the same for females and male trainees. I think more and more we have 2 people in careers, and we have to juggle how that is going to work for us. I think everyone is different. We have our own situations, and there is no right or wrong time. The time that is best to do that is when it works for you. I think now we have, not ideal, but certainly better opportunities to have a family during training, and we have more flexibility in training. It's not perfect by a long shot, but it is definitely improving. And hopefully it will just continue to get easier. But I think, as you probably know, everyone has to balance their relationships and their families, and what else they do in their life, whether it's academic pursuits or some hobby or sport that you're really keen to be involved in, because those things really contribute to what you are as a surgeon as well. If you just work, you know, I don't think that's really providing you with the best health. We know a lot more about wellness than we used to, and we know a lot more about burnout. And a lot of our trainees, a lot of our colleagues are suffering from burnout. So we really need to be a little bit more focused on how we look after our own health, physical, mental health, etc., to have a more a life that is more supportive of those things and have a community that we actually engage in, not just a narrow, tiny little part of work. Right, well, I have, I'm married with 2 teenage girls, and they are both very much into music and musicals. They've been in a lot of them. We live in Canberra, so we like to get outside down by the lake. We like to go to theatre, musical performances, live music. So really that, and spend time with our friends. Fortunately, Canberra's a bit of a well-hidden secret where all your friends are only 5 minutes drive away. So it's very easy to get together with people down here and not have to hike across the city or make plans 6 weeks ahead. So being social, getting outdoors, ride around the lake, some live music or live theatre would be all on our agenda. I read quite a lot, so I really would struggle. There's so many good books. I read one recently that I quite enjoy called Red Notice, and it is a book about a guy who was really doing business in Russia during the time where the USSR was broken down, and it's his quite well written story about his life there and what was going on in Russia. And it's fascinating now because it's how all the oligarchs were created, and it really informs a lot of what is happening in the Ukraine. So yeah, I'd recommend that. It's a great book. I quite enjoy a lot of Australian literature, things like Narrow Road to the Deep North, terrible story about the war, but really well written, quite powerful. My husband's in defence, so quite a little bit of an interest in what we've done and where we're going. Certainly with issues going on in the South China Sea, and being in Canberra, you're exposed quite a lot to diplomacy and defence. Also quite like the Rosie Project, which is a humorous story about someone on the autism spectrum. So I would not say they're my onlys, but just a wide variety of reading. I enjoy a lot of things. I quite like uplifting stories such as the Hidden Figures movie about the women who supported the first moon landing by being the calculators. Anything that is really just gives you a different perspective. It probably goes back to the diversity as well. Really, minorities achieving things or their stories. I'd also like the odd rom-com as well, and really enjoyed the Lady Gaga A Star Is Born. Again, back to the musicals.